Hey, we're live. Welcome to another episode of the WP Crowd. Today is a interesting one for me because I've been wanting to do this podcast for quite a while. It's been on my topic list probably since I started the WP Crowd. I've been wanting to talk JavaScript for quite a while, and then Matt Mullenweg decided he wanted to talk JavaScript, so now I'm forced to talk JavaScript. Um, as usual, let me do some intros here with my one guest today. Unfortunately, Matt Cromwell could not join us last minute due to a scheduling conflict. He will
Can
be
I pretend to be Matt?
you
Can you just introduce me twice and once introduce me as Matt?
Yes. So first on my left, I have Josh. Josh, you want to introduce yourself? Who
Oh,
are you?
sorry. I should have put my little thing at the bottom too, so I would know. Like I always like to put that there so I don't forget. My name is Josh Pollock. I come from Caldera WP. We make a drag and drop responsive form builder called Caldera Forms, and you can find me on Twitter at Josh412.
Okay, next we have Matt. Matt, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes. My name is Matt Cromwell. I work at a place called WordPress. We're the makers of Give WP, the best way to accept donations for your nonprofit and another organization on WordPress. And I don't know what my own Twitter is.
It's Learn with Matt Cromwell.
Good point.
Learn with Matt something. Anyway, yeah. I'm sorry you have to leave, Matt.
Yeah.
All right. Before we actually start, I also want to have a quick shout out to Hi Chris. Just felt like saying that. That's
Hi Chris.
Hi Chris. All right. JavaScript. Matt. God, so
Jesus. Now I confused you.
Yeah, Josh and I were talking a little bit before the show, and there's a couple of things we wanted to go over as far as people who are just getting into JavaScript now, or maybe you have some experience with JavaScript and are, trying to take it to the next level. I think the best place to start maybe is to let's do a rundown of like a 5 or so or less minutes, both of us talking about how we learned JavaScript and kind of our path. So Josh, why don't you just go first and talk about how you got into it and where you are now and blah, blah, blah.
Okay, so I learned PHP by Googling it. I decided I was going to be a WordPress developer accidentally with no intention. And so I started hacking my WordPress theme and found out eventually I was writing what was called PHP. And then at some point I decided, I'm going to learn JavaScript. This time I'm going to do it the right way. So I went out and bought one of these, right? JavaScript, the definitive guide. And I went on the JavaScript is sexy and website, which has like how to learn JavaScript the right way. And I went on Canyon. And then I ended up just Googling it, really like everybody else does. And I regret that, actually. I really wish I had taken the time to at least like finish the Code Academy course and learn it. But yeah, I learned jQuery mainly as a DOM manipulation, and then eventually got a basic understanding of what, how to use encapsulation in JavaScript to like write at least a mini application using mainly jQuery. And now, with help from Roy, I've learned myself some Angular, and I'm starting to backtrack into like how JavaScript actually works. I guess that's my journey, if that makes sense.
Yeah, my journey is very similar. So I started with jQuery. I don't remember what version it was, but it was pretty early on. But it was the same thing. I think my first thing was I wanted to hide and show something really easily. And I actually knew the JavaScript method for it. Like I was doing the on-click with this convoluted JavaScript within the HTML DOM. And it worked, but it wasn't very clean, and obviously it wasn't very extendable for me at the time. So I picked up jQuery. I learned quickly how to do like quick fade-ins and fade-outs and stuff like that. And from there, I kept on learning JavaScript that was kind of behind jQuery, kind of learning by doing for a few years until, and it's funny, I just looked at this yesterday because we're talking about 4.4 coming out and how the REST API is making its way to the 25%. And we're talking, and was it Rachel Baker put up that everyone's saying it was 3 years or 2 years in the making for the API. And I think my Angular theme, my first commit to it was something like early 2013. It wasn't until about December 2013 I included the WP API at the time, which was just coming out of Google Summer of Code or something. It was pretty early on for the API, but I was playing with another API at the time for WordPress, which sucked.
If you look in my book, I kind of pasted the embeds of the tweets from where Ryan McHugh's talking about getting the API into like 3.7 or something.
Oh.
And Nathan's like, yeah, that's not happening, bro.
So yeah, I mean, it's interesting to look back at where kind of jQuery to JavaScript to Angular, and then connecting all the two. I said in my talk at WordCamp LA, and if you want to check that out on WordPress.tv, leveling up as a developer is super important. Learning new things, and when you want to learn something new, JavaScript, Angular, whatever it is, you should leverage what you already know. So basically, to make the point of I need to learn something to now I know something, leverage what you already know, and you'll make that process a lot quicker. So I wanted to learn Angular. I used WordPress as my kind of what I knew already, and it helped me get to learning Angular much, much faster. So a question that Josh has brought up that is actually asked of him and of me since the whole JavaScript bombshell was brought on was people immediately ask what framework they should learn. So basically they hear, hey, I have to learn JavaScript, and the first immediate response is, which framework should I be learning? Josh, what's your response to that question? Like, how do you answer that?
I think there's two answers. One is Angular, and the other is it's the wrong question to ask, right? And I like to, before I get out on the high horse with my second answer, remember that if your goal is actually to like make something this week, just learn Angular. It's not that hard, and like now you can make something. But if you want to like deeply, truly understand JavaScript, which was part of, right, I was in the room and actually had fabulous seats. I think we cut the line a little bit. And he said, like, you should deeply learn JavaScript. And I think, and I can't speak for Matt, but I think either Matt Cromwell or the other Matt, is that that he was saying that we tend to have this knowledge of JavaScript to make a theme work, or to manipulate the DOM or to implement some framework. But we have this practical knowledge. We don't have a deep knowledge, and that's what's going to prevent us from making React for WordPress. That's going to prevent us from saying, okay, I don't need React here. I don't need Angular here. I don't need Backbone here. WordPress, everybody's talking about React. WordPress is written in Backbone. The WordPress admin, almost everything JavaScript is written in Backbone. I don't know if there was any intent to that, but that was the decision that got made. And so I think that when you learn a framework, you miss, and by you, I mean me too, you miss understanding how object-oriented programming works in JavaScript. I know until quite recently, I was writing basically some weird version of functional PHP in JavaScript, right? Like I was writing like functions with namespaces because I didn't understand how closures worked. And so I would say that if your question first is what is a framework, and you don't understand the basics of what objects are, and you don't understand that everything's an object, if you don't understand scope, you don't understand closures, you're not ready to choose a framework. You lack the ability to deeply understand what the hell it is you're doing. Unless you're in a hurry, just, hack on Angular and keep running with it.
I support that. I've been a huge Angular fan for a very long time. The whole JS framework discussion is definitely one that I don't want to have right now, because there is no right answer to that question. I think one thing that, if you're just coming into JavaScript and you're thinking, and your mind is Angular or React, your mind is definitely, I kind of agree, it's not in the right place. If you're just coming into JavaScript, think jQuery. I think jQuery as a library, so jQuery is a library versus a framework. jQuery allows you to do things with JavaScript to your existing theme, so your existing PHP templates, client side. So basically it loads, and then you can do something with jQuery very easily. And so you don't have to tap into things like the API. And a lot of people, I think, are overwhelmed by that. Like, they think, oh, I have to learn JavaScript. That means I have to learn how to work with the API. That means I have to learn how to work with Angular. But no, I was talking to Betsy yesterday, or is it a couple of days ago, and I was asking him what he was doing, and I kind of posted up on Twitter, like, what are you guys learning, or what are you guys choosing to learn today with JavaScript? And Jesse Peterson responds that he was working on a header, mobile header. And that's the kind of things that I think people should be learning first and foremost. Like, tackle something simpler with jQuery, like create a project for yourself and modify an existing theme website and add a jQuery element to it without installing a WordPress plugin. So I'm sure there's plenty of WordPress plugins that are, mobile menu, header, everything you need kind of things, but try to do it without it. See if you can actually integrate a jQuery plugin, as we call them, like a jQuery, I don't know another word for plugin, but kind of like another subset of a way you can work with jQuery.
You mean a plugin?
Yes, a jQuery plugin, not a WordPress plugin. Get a jQuery plugin and get it working, and to do something with your WordPress theme. He chose one for his header, which allowed it to, basically disappear and reappear as you scroll up and down the page in mobile. So that was an easy one for him to kind of work with and start with. So I'd say that's a really good stepping stone. If you're just getting into JavaScript and you want to understand how more or less it works, first pick up jQuery, get to understand what the dollar sign means and how to work with that, and then understand how it works by actually doing something. Give yourself a little easy project that you can work on over a couple days, and next thing you know, you're going to be creating your own jQuery plugin, or you're going to be creating WordPress plugins around a jQuery plugin. So it's pretty cool. I think that's definitely I would recommend being my first stepping stone for someone who's kind of just getting into it. I understand that if you have absolutely no experience with JavaScript at all, even getting into jQuery, just that first step or half step can be kind of tricky. And that's why I really recommend things like Code Academy. And I hate to plug this because I know it's meant for more school kids, but code.org has an awesome interface that's both block level, like literally drag and dropping blocks around, to actual JavaScript, typing in JavaScript, like very, very basic JavaScript. And there's a Star Wars version of it right now. It's a big promotion that we're doing over at Disney. And
I like that you're plugging Disney, like this little place that you work at, like they're a struggling corporation and you want to make sure they do well.
yes.
Says the guy with their licensed characters in the background.
Yeah. That's funny. I don't even have any. Anyway, yeah. So if you go to Hour of Code, or it's just like code.org/Star Wars, honestly, it's a cool little program. You make BB-8 and R2 roam around, but it'll get you some understanding of the JavaScript like syntax. which then you can take and move into jQuery or something else. So like really that might be the good first step if you have no experience with JavaScript at all. And honestly, I find it fun. Like I probably have spent way too much time on code.org/Star Wars playing around with it just because it's kind of fun. So let's say you've taken that step already. So you're kind of like, you're playing around with jQuery and you're ready to take the next step. What did you go after jQuery, Josh?
I mean, again, I question like the Angular, but that seems like there's a big gap both in time and knowledge. I think that for me, and I've got to thank Phil Lewis from on Pod's team, who showed me how to use one closure that's extensible as your application object, if that makes sense, right? That pattern where you're encapsulating your app for what the plugin you're building, the theme that you're building, and being able to make that extendable so you can grab that out, right? So you make that one variable in the global scope, that pattern. And, I've used that a lot. If you look at like the live commenting plugin, there's some hacky stuff in there, but I'd love to rewrite the entire thing in Angular. But it's one of the couple things I've written that like use proper JavaScript. If anything else that my name's on that uses good JavaScript is mainly David Kramer wrote. I mean, I think like, for Caldera WP stuff, we have this huge Ajax framework that works entirely off HTML attributes. That's protected me from having to write a lot of complicated JavaScript. Good. But it's another framework. And so I think understanding how to put things encapsulation, how to put things inside of an object so you have a particular scope for your application was kind of my next big thing conceptually. But when I say it's hacky, it's written in this weird combination of like jQuery when I know how to use jQuery and just regular plain JavaScript when I know how to do that. And that sort of, it works. But it could be faster.
I think another thing to point out, and you've already kind of said these kind of points, is if you want to really get into advanced JavaScript, learn object-oriented programming as far as it contains to JavaScript. And if you already feel like you have a good grasp of OOP PHP, you'll find it really easy to transition, I think. I find it easy to transition from one to the other because they're very similar as far as how I kind of visualize how I'm coding things, class structures, things like that. Closures are a very big key thing to learn. It was a joke a couple years back that if you were essentially applying or interviewing for a JavaScript kind of role or front-end developer role, all you had to do was just say JavaScript closures and like they would hire you on the spot. Nowadays it's a little bit trickier than that, but feel free.
What do you have to say? React?
Yeah. Angular. You're hired. No, I think closures aren't even an easy thing to grasp sometimes. Like it took me quite a few whiteboards of jotting down notes and examples. I had an awesome mentor, a guy named Dean Sofer. He started the Angular UI project. So like UI router, that's stems from his project. He taught me over the weekend Angular when I first started learning it, and then he taught me what closures are, again with the big fat whiteboard. And it was not easy the first time. It was like you either get it or you don't get it kind of thing. I didn't get it the first time. It took me a little bit. Scope. I actually found scope easier to understand once I got into Angular, because in Angular, you literally have a variable called scope. And when something is not in scope, it's just not in that variable. And it was just the easiest way for me to understand what scope is. When you are not working in Angular and there is no scope variable, you really don't know what's in scope and what's not in scope. So makes it a little bit trickier. But scope in JavaScript is a huge thing. Think of it like, what's a good way to describe it to a PHP person?
Yeah, like, the difference between global scope inside a function scope and inside of a class scope.
Yeah, I mean
Very
PHP
similar.
also has. I mean PHP has scope too. So yeah, it's the same concept, especially
It's
when
a
you
little,
talk.
it's a little trickier in the sense that you don't really have like the global keyword.
Yeah, I mean again, that's why Angular was so. I really think I took a next level with JavaScript when I learned Angular, not because I learned Angular and that was my reasoning, but I actually learned more core JavaScript when I picked up Angular. Same reason, same way that we picked up JavaScript when we learned jQuery. You kind of just learn new things about JavaScript you didn't know before. And that was just one of them. I mean, scope was something I already knew, could wrap my head around, but it like took it to the next level for me when I literally had a global variable called scope, and then there was also a root scope for Angular, which is a little more global. So, you end up learning by taking the next step with a framework or a library. You end up learning more of the base JavaScript, which is why I don't think I'd recommend anyone really learning JavaScript by like vanilla JavaScript straight off the bat. I think that, you know, learning the syntax for like document, get element by ID, blah, blah, like all of the default vanilla JavaScript is great. You should know it, but you don't have to pick up a book and learn that. I think eventually that will come to you once you've learned it through something like jQuery or Angular or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, though I do think that, right, like writing vanilla JavaScript is generally insane in the sense of you can use jQuery instead. But I think that, or, the framework that abstracts it out for you. But I know that just learning how to get like a DOM object into a variable without jQuery was a big deal to me. In the sense that I don't think I understood that every part of the DOM was an object until then, and what that really meant.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't think I understood the fact that because it's an object, all of its attributes are properties of it. These sorts of things. I don't think that jQuery because jQuery abstracts that a little bit out of you would use a jQuery constructor, and then you would do dot attribute data ID, right? It didn't occur to me that attribute is a property. It didn't occur to me that ID is a property of that object, right? Until I did like var equals document dot get element by ID, and then var dot ID to get the ID. Yeah. That's only when it clicked to me that, hey, this object, it has a property called ID. If that makes sense.
You learn stuff because, I mean, jQuery helps you just do vanilla JavaScript a lot easier. So, you end up learning kind of what's behind jQuery as you kind of get into it. We have some questions here on our chat that I want to answer before we run out of time. Is Angular a front end or back end language? Josh, I'll let you answer that one.
You're the Angular expert.
It's
right. Like, everything that I know about Angular, I read from some random beginning tutorial, or like you corrected me when I messed up.
So Angular is definitely a front end language. It sits on the front end as a client side application framework. You tap into a back end with it. So, for example, the wonderful WordPress REST API, which is coming in 4.4, a great back end to tap into with Angular. But yeah, it's primarily front end. It does all its stuff client side. Is the likes of Angular and Node the same kind of deal as Ruby on Rails? Is it just an alternative to something like PHP? Node is a different stack than PHP. So WordPress runs on something called the LAMP stack, which is a PHP MySQL stack. Node is its own server. Ruby on Rails also. So they're kind of completely separate. It depends on what server you have, what you want to run, and there's different applications that you can justify using each one or the other. Obviously, if you're using WordPress, you're probably looking at a content-heavy website that, you need something with an easy admin. So, boom, that's your LAMP stack right there. Ruby on Rails tends to be more for higher level application building where there is no necessarily content structure or data structure. You're kind of creating it as you go. Node is the same thing. It's just the newest or kind of the hottest right now backend.
Was
Just
there any way? Sorry to interrupt, but is Node the first server-side JavaScript framework, or just the first one to be cool?
I don't know if I can answer that truthfully because I don't know, but I'm going to
Just say
say
yes.
I'm just going to say yes
Because I qualified with it or with the first one that was really cool.
Yeah, exactly. It was the first one of any note. How about that?
Of any
In fact, note. Yeah, like it was only the first noteworthy one. How about that? And it actually, there was a fork of Node. I think it was IO.js, something like that.
Yes.
Which is now being merged back into Node, which is, I think, fantastic. Like as a model, I think that's awesome. I kind of wanted to model that when I started dealing with backpress again, as kind of like a fork, which then gets remerged back into the original with better concepts. But yeah, Node's been around. There's also frameworks for Node, Express Engine being one of them. If you are a front-end dev and you want to play around with Node, I highly recommend Sales.js, Sales JavaScript. Basically, it's an MVC framework where you just go, let me install Node really quick, or sorry, Sales, which assuming you already have Node, because assuming you have Node, you install Sales, and then with Sales, you're literally creating an API. So you say things like Sales generate API users, and it creates a model and a controller for you for users, which then you can then put into Angular, right? And you already have a RESTful endpoint that you can post, delete, update, /users. Like it automatically creates an API for you. It's basically an awesome way to do the Node work without learning too much Node. Earlier this week, I was playing around with WebSockets and Sales. I really want to learn how to create like instant interaction between two users that are in completely different browsers. I picked up Sales, installed it. They already have sockets built into the whole thing, so it made things really easy. And I created a RESTful endpoints for a few things and had Angular running within minutes. It's an awesome framework. Meteor is another really good example, but I tend to recommend Sales. Another question, should I, whose preferred language for backend, whose preferred language for backend is PHP, consider moving to like Angular and APIs rather than PHP?
Can I get that?
Yes, please do.
Well, so if you want to, like, Angular is purely a front-end language, and it's awesome. I'm so on the Angular bandwagon right now. Like, I almost want to start making WordPress websites just because I could do more cool stuff with Angular. Like, traditionally, that's not a thing that I've done is make websites, but Roy and I have been working on this A/B testing plugin where the admin is a single-page web app. We should put the link to the Angular in the show notes for this, Roy.
Actual plugin?
Yeah, just the GitHub link to the. Well, we can put a link to the plugin because you should check it out. It's you can get the demo for free with the code VIP100 at ingithq.com. But we could also put the link to the Angular app in there, like just the GitHub link, and it's been fabulous. Like the other day where I asked Roy to add some graphs, and he was like, "Yeah, I can do that, but there aren't any API endpoints for that." And I was like, "Yeah, just give me an hour." And because I was also drinking coffee and reading email, it took me that long to add all those endpoints to the REST API. WordPress REST API plus Angular is a great way of doing backend, front end. But Angular can work with anything. So Angular is not a substitute for PHP. It is a complement to PHP. Or you can do something instead. And I really like that with a lot of the where I'm working on like WordPress as an app site. When we start thinking that way, you can think like, well, this WordPress backend could work with any front end or many front ends, or maybe one day it's no longer WordPress. You swap it out for something that scales better or fits some other need better, and you just structure the API the same way. You plug it right into the same framework. So to go off on a tangent on this question, WordPress plus Angular, good. Angular plus something else, good. WordPress plus something else, good. But Angular is not a replacement for PHP as a backend. And that's good, because when everybody's like, WordPress, everything's JavaScript now, it's like, well, I mean, WordPress is still, like, Calypso is a front end on top of WordPress, which is PHP and MySQL. Your PHP knowledge as a WordPress developer is only more valuable, I think, now.
Yeah, and you're going to see that relationship really build as more people that are in the JavaScript community come to WordPress. Now that the API is there, as well as people who might just, and I say this a lot, when you start leveling up, you tend to figure out which side of the server you like to be on, whether you like to be on client side or kind of the server side. And Josh and I working on this plugin kind of shows that relationship. And I think you're going to see a lot more of it, where one person's maybe a little bit more inclined to PHP and prefers working in PHP. I'm not saying you do. I'm just giving an example.
I do. I definitely do.
One person prefers PHP, one person prefers JavaScript and HTML, and that's me. So we work together very well, because literally it's what he said. I need something for data. He says, okay, give me an hour. He creates a way for me to tap into that data, and then I display that data and do all the UI magic with it.
But that's not to say that Roy doesn't know any PHPs, right? That would be a very, very serious lie. And it's also to say that whereas I'll never be a Roy when it comes to JavaScript, it's important for me to know that stuff, even if, in an ideal world, I'd have a whole team of Roys doing all my JavaScripts for me.
And I will never be a Josh when it comes to PHP, and I don't think any of us will be a Carl when it comes to PHP.
Right. And if you're not Carl Alexander, if you're not reading him for your advanced WordPress PHP leveling up, you're doing it wrong, and you should.
Carl 2016.
Seriously, I learned object-oriented PHP the right way, not as a big encapsulation of something that didn't represent an object. The actual fundamentals I learned from Carl Alexander.
Yeah. So we are out of time, but I wanted to run through some resources for people who are to learn. I would obviously recommend lynda.com. There are plenty of tutorial courses on there for WordPress and JavaScript. I'm not sure if I can announce, but there might be one particularly with Angular and WordPress coming soon, but I'm not really sure when. But
sorry, I took my breath.
Wes Boss, who wanted to be on the show today but couldn't, he has an awesome AMA on GitHub. He actually created just a repo called AMA, and all the issues are questions. One of the issues is books for learning JavaScript, where he recommends two major books. One is basically the JavaScript handbook, which I think Josh has. And then there's another book called JavaScript, The Good Parts, which is a much thinner book. I'd highly recommend getting that book instead, because if you are a person who likes looking at books and referencing and learning from books, I am not. But JavaScript, The Good Parts definitely is a good resource to just get into what is good and useful, and then you'll learn all the other basically garbage as you go. There's an awesome YouTube channel. There's a link to it on our WP Crowd podcast page. Wes Boss has a awesome React for beginners, which comes highly recommended. So if you actually did want to take the next step, get into React, reactforbeginners.com is a website where he just has tutorials for that kind of stuff. It does cost money, just like lynda.com and everything else, but definitely check it out. And the last kind of big one I want to recommend is frontendmasters.com. They have awesome beginner, intermediate, and advanced courses. The one thing I like about frontendmasters.com and I have an account there, is that their classroom setting. So literally the video is of a teacher in a classroom, and you're kind of like sitting in that classroom with them, kind of like a WordCamp session or something like that. So I think it's pretty cool. And a lot of their teachers that are on there are very highly respected developers and kind of community leaders within the front end languages. So that's all I have. All of these are actually posted on the WPCrowd.com. If you just go to this podcast page, just check out the chat and the live chat, and you'll see the links if you scroll to the top. I put them in a couple, I think yesterday. And if you have any other resources, feel free to put them in. Josh,
can I make my recommendation?
Yes, feel free.
Yesterday-ish, I'm going to say his name wrong. I'm just going to accept it. Remkes de Vries wrote Learning JavaScript and WordPress Deeply. This is an excellent article. I really recommend like reading this, and then it's a collection of links, but like in context. One of the articles it reminded me of, and I like reread yesterday, and I was reminded of how wonderful this was. One was from JavaScript is sexy.com. OOP and JavaScript, what you need to know. Like seriously, read this stuff. Even if you just use a framework and it's not that important, understanding what our OOP really means is fundamental. Also, this guy, Josh Pollock, wrote a book on the WordPress REST API and a lot of other articles, and is selling a course soon. And there's a bit of a PHP preference there, but let's say that the book is written about a third in JavaScript. And if you're a WordPress developer, you're going to be consuming the WordPress REST API a lot in the future. So I recommend that guy, Josh Pollock. He's a good one. And you can download my book for free, and you can sign up for my course if you go to joshpress.net/REST API.
Yeah, we both actually write to TorqueMag, an awesome publication. Feel free to check out Josh's work there or my articles. I actually have a Angular live, it's a live tracking little plugin, which I created and I walked through. So it definitely taps into a lot of JavaScript. And as well as joshpress.net, his website, my website, roycevon.com/blog. I go through a lot of tutorials on Angular and JavaScript and stuff like that. So kind of ran a little bit late today, but that's fine. Obviously, this is a large subject. And if you have any further questions for Josh or I, feel free to hit us up on Twitter. Josh, you're Josh412, right?
That is correct.
Josh412 on Twitter. As you can see, I'm RoyBoy789. Feel free to ask us questions. The WPCrowd.com. Check out the podcast page. All the links are there in the chat. And that's it for today. Thanks again. I'll see you guys next week.
Thanks for having me, dude.